There are some things in life you never get over. Your girl leaving you stranded at the altar, sinking your life savings into a crypto farm down in your basement, and, worst of all, trading in an entire video game library just so you can buy one new shiny console that comes with 0 games. Some things in life, just maybe, weren't meant getting over.
Hey lady, my ice is looking a little lonely. How about a refill?
Alright, mister, you've had enough Baja Blast to last you through the week. I'm cutting you off, hon.
But not enough to make me forget those games.
Everybody's got regrets, especially us gamers. There's this constant push by the industry to play the latest game, pick up the most recent system, and forget all else which came before. Well, that is until there's a new remastered version of an old classic coming out. Getting caught up in all the hype can be fun, but I think the pressure can drive us to make some horrible decisions with our games that we end up regretting. Today, I'm going to cover 4 of my biggest gaming regrets. Though I made these decisions at different times and for different reasons, they're all pretty much the same mistake. Getting rid of stuff I never should have let go of. I'm not going to include circumstances beyond my control. We've all had that one parent who one day decided to give away an old system with all of its games because we didn't play it enough.
For some reason, when I was younger and couldn't buy my own games, I certainly had pickier tastes than I do now. I would often just sell or give away games I didn't want anymore and only hold onto the games I really liked and saw myself playing again. That may not sound so bad, but in retrospect, it was a bad habit due to the value certain games have now, though monetary concerns weren't the only reason I should have held on to them. I reached a point with my Game Boy collection where I just seemed to play the same games, maybe about a third of my collection. I just had no desire to hold on to or play games on Game Boy that had no save function. Passwords used to confuse me to no end, and while I certainly made exceptions for Super Mario Land and Kirby's Dream Land, the other Game Boy games I owned were either too long or too hard to get through in a single session. It made me start to rethink having them in my library, and when I learned one of my coworkers really liked Game Boy games, I offered to let him have them at no charge. He accepted, and it didn't take long for me to realize I probably should have held onto those games anyway. In the same vein, I got the game Tomba for PlayStation one Christmas after seeing a video of the game on the included demo disc, which came with my original PlayStation. I played through the game a few times actually, before realizing I didn't really care for it that much. I tend to not like cavemen as characters for some reason, and while the game had some fantastic music and great settings and played like a grand 2D platformer with RPG and Metroidvania elements, I just didn't like playing as a pink-haired caveman who had no discernible personality. I must have traded the game in at some point, probably to GameStop, and I am kicking myself now because the game at the time of this recording is now worth $170 complete. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say. When I was a kid, I used to be envious listening to people who grew up in the late 1950s and 60s getting baseball cards that exploded in value in the 90s. What I didn't realize was I had my own version of baseball cards with the video games I was collecting, even if I didn't like them. One system I went without for several years was a Sega Genesis. As a huge Sonic fan, I felt like it was the perfect console for me, but outside of the Sonic games, it was hard to find other titles I enjoyed even half as much. Again, I was pretty picky for a kid who relied on his parents to buy his video games, and as such, I only had about 8 titles for the system. When I was raising money to buy a PlayStation, I decided to take the Genesis with all my controllers, cables, and games to a pawn shop. I only ended up getting $12 for the system and $1 per game for a grand total of $20. Even though none of the Sega Genesis games I used to own took off in value, I still gave up so much gaming to get not even a tenth of the money I needed to buy a PlayStation. It simply wasn't worth the trade. This next one is quite egregious, I must warn you. I'm still mad at myself to this day for what I did. For a long time, my Game Boy and Game Gear were my two primary gaming platforms. I only had a fraction of the games for Game Gear compared to what I had for Game Boy, but I found myself playing it simply due to the screen being easier to see. In my earlier adult years, I hauled out my deluxe Game Gear case complete with the system, a car charger, an AC adapter, and 10 or so games which comprised my entire Game Gear library. I plugged the system in and was so dejected to find that the screen had degraded to a point where I could barely make out the game. Nowadays, this wouldn't be a problem at all due to how common and easy it is to replace components of older electronics with newer, better designed ones. But at the time, I was convinced I just had a big black paperweight, so I took the entire case with everything in it and tossed it in the dumpster. I couldn't bear to hold on to it and have it be a constant reminder of all those games I couldn't play anymore. I don't know why I didn't think to at least hold on to the games and look for a replacement system on eBay or something, though I was probably just too emotional to think rationally. Later, I came to view that act as one of the most disrespectful things I've ever done toward my video game heritage. And while it's not my most regrettable gaming memory, it is the one that makes me the angriest with myself. The last regret is easily my worst one, not because it makes me want to kick myself as much, but because it would probably be the most expensive one to get back. Back in 2010, my precious launch edition, fully backwards compatible 60GB PlayStation 3 kicked the bucket and gave me the dreaded yellow light of death. Being somewhat more mature and level-headed now, I did actually research what the problem most likely was and ways to fix it. It was probably caused by the GPU separating from the motherboard after years of heat and cool cycles wearing down the thermal paste holding the GPU in place. Several people suggested wrapping the PS3 up in a towel and sending hot air, like really hot, into the back vents to possibly reheat and get the paste to melt and reseat the GPU. It never worked for me, probably because all I had was a hairdryer, but it was also probably only a temporary fix at best. So I decided to bite the bullet and buy a used slim model for not much money at all. And when I told a coworker what had happened to the fat PS3, he wanted to know if he could have it to try and fix it himself. I agreed to that, and while I don't have any idea if he was ever successful, I feel like with my knowledge and experience fixing a few handhelds here and there, today I'd be willing to at least try it myself. I certainly do miss playing PS2 games on that PS3 since my slim model can't do it natively.
Fortunately, mistakes can be learned from. I no longer throw away my systems or sell my games, even if those systems have problems or I don't really care that much for the games. I hold on to my systems now since I may have a use for them later on, possibly my children discovering them and having their own adventures. And if there's a game that I don't really like and can never see myself replaying in the future, I just keep it away from my curated collection. You never know what's going to be worth hundreds or possibly even thousands in just a couple of decades. What are some of your gaming regrets? I talked a lot about getting rid of stuff I wish I hadn't, but maybe you've got something different to share. Let us all know about it in the comments. This is Steven with Level 1 Sword, letting you all know that it's hard to have regrets when you stay sharp out there.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to keep on top of the videos, definitely take a sec to subscribe. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon if you want to follow me across the internet. Level 1 Sword also has a bi-weekly podcast, so give it a listen.